Hello. Well, this is way overdue, but usually I do a book wrap up, and I don't even know if it's falling from mid June till August, but I have a very, very lengthy one today. And I have to have a list because I can barely remember all the books I have to mention rather than even being able to tell much about them. So I'll start with Victoria Schwab. Victoria Schwab, I finally gone through Vicious and Vengeful, and I don't have a second one with me. I left it in Canada, but it's a series about superpowers. So it sort of have that very modern feel. It's like heroes type of like TV series, heroes type of story, but a bit more darker, I would say. So it's actually called Villain Series. So it's about two friends who decide to try an experiment to gain superpowers. So they artificially create their superpowers, which kind of goes out of the control. It's very good. I'm really wanting my partner to read this because he's much into superheroes. And the only thing that I can say, I always find that I like following the author's progress, and I like following Victoria Schwab progress through her books, and obviously this is a bit more back in the past. The only thing in the sense of storytelling was that it shifts in between the times. We see like 10 years back and forward sort of, and it's sometimes difficult to keep up, but I think it's done still very well to actually be immersed in the story and, go on with what's going on with each of the characters. There are other superpowered characters apart from the main two, but in general, I found this is, as all Victoria Schwab books, I love it. And obviously I read the comic first before reading them, and I understand the comic was sort of in between these books. And yes, still it's really feels really, really good. So yeah, anyone who likes superheroes but not otherwise a big reader, go with these series because it's just a duology at the moment and it's something you can definitely consume quite straightforwardly. Right. Now is by Rowan and Yew. This is about the sprites who find themselves vanishing. And this is a second book, and I now understand why the first one felt sort of unfinished a little bit. I often get this sense when I know this is series, because you can not feel always that wrap up into the knot properly. Now, I love this author. I love how it's told. I love how, nature-based it is, definitely. Again, didn't love the ending, but I struggle with endings apparently. So otherwise, at the end, as same as in the first book, I think there are mention of activities you can do and shows to discover and all that sort of things, but it's also like such a big thing. It's not in all the books that you can find that. And I think it's all very much around the nature, which is like so much with my art and my world, especially because I do write about sprites, and it is a children's book or like middle grade. So I would say whoever likes middle grades is definitely a discovery. Okay. Now, other one of the younger adult, I would say, books is Tokyo Ever After, and I ashamed, even though it says best of the year in that year that I bought it. I did like the cover. I found that it's too teenagey maybe for me. It's sort of like Princess Diaries, and I couldn't really get immersed into it. The characters felt bland, nothing really hooked me in, and I didn't finish it. So that's all I can say. It might not be my genre, that's all, really. Now, the book that I did as audiobook was Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And it's amazing. I know a lot of people said it's very good. It's about actress, how she's retelling her life story and why she was married so many times. And it is a love story. It's about one sort of true love, let's say, and it's about family and connection, and that you have to set your priorities right. And I think it's absolutely. I love the conclusion. I loved how it's ended and how it's talked about these priorities and all. And I love how intimate it is regards the love matters. I think in the beginning, when obviously we see some of the failed love life of the actress and why certain decisions were made, could have been a bit frustrating, I would say. There are several chapters when I was like, there's a lot of door handles in this book. There a lot of things happen when someone intrudes someone or sort of, but it was just a short time in the beginning. It really resonates with 50s, let's say 50s movie stars. You can feel that flowing into it. It sort of reminds me a little bit of Marilyn Monroe's story, let's say, but sort of different touch to it, a bit more emotion in it, I would say. But I absolutely loved it. It's really was a pleasure to listen to it. That's all I want to say, and I see why people like the story. I did also read Vladimir Mist because that was my plan for July, and it's absolutely gorgeous. It's about this sort of. It's more about the atmosphere. I don't think it's about the plot as much. There is a plot, I think, of a missing person, and there is this sort of suggestion of almost like a fairy-like world existing. It's very much feels like magical realism. It's very close to reality. It's a lot of that sort of mood setting and ambience to it, and it inspired me to completely rewrite my story, which was originally historical, paid attention to the castles and the my country's, let's say, kings or rulers in a sense. But I decided that it wasn't really lying with me in sense of historical fiction. It wasn't really modern enough for me to tell it, even if I wanted to tell it in a fantasy way. So I decided to take some of the ideas I wanted to bring into that historical fiction and some of the plot points that I wanted to take from maybe history and turn it into the more modern, urban-like political matter regards, it's not original, but regards that nature conflict with urbanization and make it fairy-like. So make it fairy adjacent. So some of the fantastical elements come from this people that are like fairies or nymphs or and an urban city sort of situation. And at the moment I want to see if it twists that way. Like a doorknob. Let's see if we can enter that world. And I much more prefer, after reading Blood in the Mist, I much more prefer that story. And I could get the sense what I would possibly want to tell. Amulet, and it's a graphic novel, and I love it. It's sort of about this house, and it starts like a discovery sort of story where you discover something that is off of ordinary, and then it suddenly goes into that tentacly sort of story where it's like, is it Lovecraftian? I absolutely love it because I love Lovecraftian stories. Obviously, it's just first number. I have no idea how long it goes, but it suddenly turns very different from what you start with. I thought it's gonna be more fantasy, but it actually feels more like fantasy horror, let's say. And I love it. I love it. I discovered Lore Olympus Volume 2, and I love everything about it. And obviously, I love the first one, and I love the second one, and I'm kind of regretful that I'm not reading it on webtoons because I really want to see where the story goes. And there are, as in the first book, there were some trigger warnings, the most there, I think. But I do want to say it can be heartbreaking. At certain pages, you can feel tension, sadness, you feel for the characters, you feel they put in their situations. But I think all in all, that's like in a while that I enjoyed the romance story. Really long time ago. So this is something that I enjoy, and I don't know why it's sort of some sort of characters a little bit typical. We have this very innocent, girl who Persephone, and this shy, closed off god Hades, and dark, who is like perceived as dark, let's say. And that's that awkward coupling is really, really, gold medal for me. I don't know, but I loved it. I loved it so much. I don't want to spoil anything else. Whoever's done the series or haven't done it, definitely have to get into it. Graphic novel as well. And then other graphic novels, okay? Lumberjanes. I did mention them before. I read it a little bit further. Oh, yeah, 4 to 6, I think, was where I was this time. I did had a different edition as well of Lumberjanes that is out of a series, this Internal Compass. It's a little bit like a spin-off more than anything, but regardless that, it's something different and I think very random, as I say, it would do so well as a cartoon if it's not done yet. And I do love, and I still do love the things in the beginning, and then we have like a gallery of pictures, and if each volume, in the beginning we have a sort of a little introduction, which is amazing. It feels more like a journal. They have each chapter opening with like a badge situation, which I mentioned last time. It is amazing. And at the end, we have like almost like snapshots of a story. And, I was taking some of these ideas into my scrapbooky story. Not to all of them, but every single story for me is different. So I was taking some of these sort of things to my scrapbooking story because that's what I want to bring on a sense of design and a sense of art, let's say. Now, I also read or also reading Sprinkle of Sorcery, and it's a second part of Pinch of Magic series. And I do have a third, so I just have to finish with them. I not getting into it, and I don't know why. I can tell it's magical. I can tell at some points I feel like, oh, it's very nicely written and I am into it, but then I don't get fully into it. But I was speaking about this before, that sometimes when the stories are way too magical, they not always get me drawn into them. So I want a nice and good balance. The other graphic novel was Seance Tea Party that I picked up in Canada. I left it with my partner who's now separated from me, so I wanted him to have something nice to read. And he does read graphic novels, and it's sort of middle grade, and I always love a middle grade graphic novel. And it sort of reminds me of Tea Dragon Society, and I think anyone who liked Tea Dragon Society would love it. It's sort of very sweet, very nice pictures. It has these corners that are like embellished in small little creatures and fantasy, and it's about a girl who meets a ghost and sort of accidentally in her tea party, and they become friends. And I just found the story itself was about growing up and sort of sprites in it as well, let's say, and the imagination, and sort of sometimes that fear of losing imagination with growing up. It's very quick to read and it's very sweet. To read it, please. If you did like Tea Dragon Society, it's definitely going to be something you will like. I finally got through Understanding Comics. And it's a lot about flow and movement of comics and sort of splash of color. They did a chapter Splash of Color, and I was like, oh, what is this? It suddenly like becomes colorful while the rest of the book is colorless. So it was really like big change. Personally, I did say this to my partner, and I know that a lot of comic artists like found this amazing. I found that a lot of things explained it very layman's terms, let's say, for everyone to understand, but wasn't necessarily eye-opening to me, because maybe I read too many comics already, so I found it was to people who might not have been open to comics before, and that whole beginning feels a bit slow in that sense. The last one, I think, I do have to say, this is a Anne Sophie's, who is on the OfferTube, debut novel, and it's a trilogy, and first part is Removable Echo, and I did wanted to look into it because I know how much effort she put in it. I don't usually read science fiction, and this is more of a science fiction dystopia, I would say. It's about a community where you get people selected for memory erasal, and it is all about that, reclaiming memories and piecing everything together. It was for me really difficult in the beginning to understand why community like that exists, why we're doing it. And since in the end she put a little bit beginning of the next book, and I feel like there more explanation lie in the next book. As often I do notice with series something is not completely tied in the story and you still have questions. Often that's what I found a problem with series rather than a good thing, but here we are. Anyhow, it's so nicely tied together. I want to say it's very graphically pleasant in how it opens each chapter. It's actually feels quite short, and I don't know if it's benefit or not. Because let's see, it's 240 pages, and knowing that it's a trilogy, sometimes for some of the series I feel, would we have done better as a thick book? That sometimes comes as a question, would we have done better not to be separated? Would it have been better as a duology? We don't like thick books a lot of times because we then have to read slowly, but this was actually quick. So I don't know if it's benefit or harm in any sense, but I often bit iffy with a series, as you could have imagined from me talking already. I think that's it. Oh, that was a lengthy one. At the moment, I'm also, just to mention, because I don't think I might put it in the next one, I'm listening to audiobook called Before Coffee Gets Cold, because it's on Morgan Long Patreon reading list, and I wanted to join onto that and see how do I like it. And so far so much is quite interesting. It's about time traveling, and I just feel like I'm in the beginning of it, but actually it's not very long, so it might actually not take me a while to finish it. And so far so good for August. In the beginning of August, I'm just gonna finish a sprinkle of sorcery and finish Before Coffee Gets Cold before picking up anything else. But I have such a big, wonderful list to look into. So see you next time. Thank you for sitting in. Bye.